My name is Martha, and for over 40 years, I was the devoted wife of a man who built a tech empire from nothing. On the day his will was read, my two children divided $55 million between them as if it were a poker game, and all I was left with was a dusty wooden box that looked like garbage. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My husband Robert had been gone for a little over a month, and the grief still felt like a physical weight on my chest. For the first time in a very long time, I was sitting in a room with my entire family, but it was not for a holiday dinner or a birthday celebration. It was to hear the final wishes of a man who had dedicated his life to building a legacy for them, for us. The office was located in a sleek, modern skyscraper in downtown Boston. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The lawyer, a stiff woman named Rose, sat behind an enormous mahogany desk, shuffling through a thick pile of papers. Opposite me, on the other side of the desk, sat my son Liam. He was 39, a mirror image of his father in his ambition, but lacking any of his father's warmth. Next to him was my daughter Chloe, 35, a professional socialite whose carefully curated life seemed to be an endless series of parties and designer clothes. Her husband Mark sat beside her, a perpetually smiling man who I always felt was just a little too eager. Rose cleared her throat and began to read in a cold, professional voice. She listed properties, company shares, and investment portfolios with a chilling detachment. The numbers were staggering. "To my son, Liam," she began, "I leave all interests in the company, Herrera Tech, as well as the accompanying assets and liquid funds, valued at approximately $30 million. Liam's face, which had been a mask of studied composure, twitched with a small, self-satisfied smirk. He straightened his shoulders as if to emphasize his new position of power. Rose continued, her voice flat. "To my daughter, Chloe, I leave the coastal estates in Cape Cod and the luxury condos in the city, the sports cars, and the remaining investment portfolios and accounts, valued at approximately $25 million. Chloe's eyes lit up with a feverish glee. She leaned forward, whispering something to Mark. He squeezed her hand and gave her a smile that was all teeth. They were getting it all. The homes we had built together, the cars we had driven, the assets we had spent a lifetime accumulating. My heart sank, a heavy stone in my chest. I sat there, invisible, a ghost in my own family, waiting to hear what the love of my life had left for me. When Rose finished the endless list of properties my children were inheriting, she paused. She put on a pair of glasses and looked over her papers. The silence in the room stretched, thick and suffocating. My heart began to race. Finally, it was my turn. After all the sacrifices, all the years of working side by side with Robert, he had to have left me something. Something to live on. Something to protect me. Rose looked at me, her expression unreadable. "And to Mrs. Martha Herrera," she announced, "I leave this personal property." She held up a small, weathered wooden box. It was nothing like the sleek documents and fancy deeds she had just read from. It was stained and worn, a small, dark object that looked like it had been forgotten in an attic for decades. I took it from her trembling hands. It felt almost weightless. Chloe tried to stifle a laugh, a sound that was pure venom. "At least you have something to put your old recipes in, Mum," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Liam didn't even look up from the documents he was reviewing. Mark sighed, a loud, theatrical gesture that suggested my very existence was a burden. The box felt like a mockery in my hands. It was the physical manifestation of my humiliation. Rose turned to my children, and their conversation resumed as if I were no longer there. They talked about wire transfers, deeds, and corporate structures, their voices full of a newfound authority. I felt like a stranger sitting in that leather chair. I stood up slowly, clutching the box. No one said a word. No one offered a ride. I simply walked out of that office, feeling that my entire life had been reduced to a dusty wooden box that likely contained nothing but sentimental trinkets with no real value. I had no idea that what I held in my hands was the key to a world that was about to change forever. The silence of the mansion was deafening as I walked back inside. The echo of my children's laughter still seemed to hang in the air, a final, cruel insult. I went straight to Robert's study, the one room in the house that had always felt like his sanctuary. I placed the small, dusty wooden box on his enormous mahogany desk. It felt heavy now, weighed down not by its contents, but by the significance of the moment. The box was unremarkable, perhaps 8 inches long and 6 inches wide. There was no lock, only that small, intricate symbol carved into the lid, almost hidden by the wear of time. It was a detail I recognized instantly, the crest of the Medici family, specifically a small artistic flourish from a background figure in one of Botticelli's paintings. Robert and I had seen that painting on our very first trip to Florence over 40 years ago, a trip where we fell in love not just with each other, but with the beauty and history of art. My fingers traced the carving. This wasn't a random piece of junk. This was Robert. I gently lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of old, faded velvet, were 2 items: a severely outdated USB flash drive and a small, brittle piece of paper that looked like a bookmark. On the paper, Robert's familiar, elegant handwriting was scrolled, "Start with what we built together." I pushed aside the sadness and felt a surge of cold focus. My mind, which had been numb with grief, now snapped into a sharp, analytical mode. I was a former art historian. I knew how to find hidden meanings and solve complex puzzles. My children, in their rush for the obvious millions, wouldn't have given this box a second thought. I picked up Robert's old laptop, which Liam had sneered at and left behind, calling it a museum piece. It was slow, but it worked. I inserted the USB. It contained only one folder, named The Collection, and it was password protected. The file prompt didn't ask for a standard password. It displayed a line of text. "The artist who hid a secret message in his most famous work." I smiled grimly. This was less a security measure and more a final, intimate game only Robert and I could play. The answer was Leonardo da Vinci, of course, a common art history fact. But when I typed in Da Vinci, the system asked for a numerical key. I knew Robert would never use a simple, predictable key. He was a man of patterns and deep sentimentality, always related to history. I thought back to the Italian trip, the year we were married, the addresses of our first apartments. Nothing fit. Then I remembered a conversation we'd had years ago, joking about the historical figure who had the most secrets. Robert had mentioned the date the Medici Bank collapsed, a pivotal moment in European finance and art patronage. I typed the year, 1494. Click. The interface accepted the code. The screen changed immediately. It wasn't a standard document folder. It was a decentralized application, displaying a dizzying series of complex alphanumeric strings, each labeled wallet key. My eyes darted to the top left corner of the screen where a live balance counter was spinning, its currency labeled BTC. The number stabilized at 100,000 thousands in dollars. $100 million. My breath hitched. The laptop almost slipped from my grasp. I sat back, staring at the number. My children had fought over $55 million, a fortune I now realized was simply the public-facing, taxable portion of Robert's wealth. He had been quietly building a colossal hidden empire in the digital space. Underneath the balance, a second clue appeared, flashing in bright yellow text. Now, seek the next piece of art. Robert hadn't just protected me financially, he had left me a roadmap, a treasure hunt coded in the language of our shared life. He knew Liam and Chloe, focused solely on the tangible assets, would overlook the invisible ones. He had disguised my real inheritance as a mere sentimental keepsake. The thought brought a sharp, exhilarating clarity to my mind. The game had just begun, and the rules were entirely in my favor. I stared at the computer screen for a long time, the number 100,000 Jason Sons flashing mockingly in the upper corner. It seemed impossible. For over 4 decades, I had handled all the family's finances, managed the household, and balanced the checkbook down to the last penny. Robert had been an open book, or so I thought, sharing every detail of his business dealings and investments with me. And yet, he had managed to create a secret digital fortune so vast, it made the 55 million my children had inherited look like pocket change. My head began to spin as I read the next clue. Now, seek the next piece of art. It was a familiar pattern. Robert had always loved puzzles, a love he had shared with me and only with me. Liam and Chloe would never have thought to look for clues in our history. They were too busy looking for tangible things they could hold and sell. I clicked on the link. It led me to a high-resolution photograph of Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. I knew the painting well, of course. We had seen it together in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, on the same trip where we had seen the painting with the Medici crest. My heart ached with a sudden wave of longing for Robert, for the man who had loved me enough to build this intricate, protective fortress just for me. The photo was a puzzle in itself. My mouse hovered over the image, and a single word popped up when I placed it over Venus's hand. Trust. A second later, a string of seemingly random numbers appeared. I copied them down, knowing they must be the key to the next digital wallet. Robert had a meticulous mind. He had planned every single detail. I opened the next wallet using the new password. The balance was even more astonishing. $200 million. But this time, it was not in Bitcoin. It was a collection of rare NFTs of historical documents and photographs, a letter from an American president I recognized, a photograph from the first moon landing, stamped with a private collector's mark, a deed to a piece of land in the Hamptons. Robert had been quietly acquiring these assets for years, under a fake name, always in the digital world. He knew the paper trail would have been too easy for our greedy children to follow. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. I found a final folder in the digital collection, encrypted with a password that was the date of our first kiss. Inside were dozens of files, audio recordings, and documents. The titles were cryptic, but their contents were not. The first file I opened was titled Operation Sunset. I clicked play, and a familiar voice filled the silent room. It was my son, Liam, talking on the phone. "The old man is getting weaker," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "We need to speed up the plan. We can't afford to have him change his mind on the will." My blood ran cold. The next voice was Chloe's. "I'm already in debt, Liam. We need that money now. The foundation is getting too much attention from the wrong people." I suddenly understood what Robert had been trying to tell me. Liam was not just a reckless gambler. He had been secretly siphoning millions from the family business to fund his habit. And Chloe's fake charity was a front for money laundering and fraud. They were not just reckless and self-serving. They were criminals. The final audio file in the folder was a conversation between Liam and Mark. They spoke of the will, laughing about how stupid I was to believe a simple wooden box was all I was going to get. Mark's voice was filled with contempt as he said, "She's so old, so naive. She won't know what's happening until she's already in the facility. We'll just have to declare her mentally incompetent, Liam replied, his voice chillingly practical. It's easy enough. We already have a doctor on the payroll who can sign the papers. Once she's in the nursing home, we can sell her house and use the money to pay off our debts. It's the perfect plan. My body started to shake. They hadn't just taken the money. They had planned to take my freedom, my home, my dignity. They were going to lock me away in a gilded cage while they squandered the very fortune my husband had built with his bare hands. Robert hadn't left me a treasure hunt to show me how much he loved me. He had left it to give me the tools to fight back. He had foreseen all of this. He had planned for their betrayal. And now, I had all the evidence I needed to stop them. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a searing, cold rage. The total value of Robert's hidden assets, the digital empire he had created and bequeathed to me through a trail of art history clues, stood at over $300 million. But the money was irrelevant now. What mattered was the betrayal, the sheer malice of their plan to have me declared mentally incompetent and locked away. I sat in Robert's study, the old laptop screen casting a pale light on my face, and read the transcript of the final audio file again. It wasn't just my children. It was Rose, the family lawyer, whom I had always considered a trusted friend, mentioned by Liam in connection to the doctor on the payroll. The conspiracy ran deeper than I ever imagined. Robert had known the full scope of their avarice, and that's why he created this digital sanctuary. My first act was to secure my position. I couldn't simply transfer the $300 million to a local bank. That would trigger alarms and alert Liam, who was still listed as the CEO of the main companies. I needed a ghost to manage the ghost money. I remembered Robert mentioning a discreet, high-level financial consultant he used for his early tech ventures, a woman named Ilara Vance, based in Geneva, Switzerland. I dug through Robert's physical desk, bypassing the compartments my children would have searched for cash, and found an old, encrypted satellite phone. It was an extreme measure, but I needed extreme security. I called the number. Ilara answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and efficient, despite the late hour in Boston. "This is Ilara," she said, her voice carrying a slight, elegant European accent. "This is Martha Herrera, Robert's wife," I replied, keeping my voice low and steady. "He asked me to call you using this device if he ever stopped calling you." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "I see," Ilara responded. "I was expecting your call, Mrs. Herrera." Robert left explicit, detailed instructions for this contingency. He was meticulous, as always. I explained the situation. The fake will, the $30 million distribution, the dusty wooden box, and the $300 million in digital assets. I didn't have to mention Liam's and Chloe's betrayal. Ilara seemed to sense the underlying tension. "Your husband created an unassailable legal wall, Mrs. Herrera," Ilara informed me. "The official will only covers the surface assets. The entirety of the digital fortune is held in an offshore, decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO, registered under your name as the sole beneficiary. It is legally outside the purview of the local estate. You have complete, immediate control." I felt a dizzying surge of power. "I need two things, Ilara. First, I need to create a liquidity channel, a ghost account, in a local American bank, capable of moving large sums discreetly. I need immediate access to $5 million for operational expenses and legal defense. Second, I need you to find me the best, most ruthless, and most discreet lawyer in the entire United States, preferably one specializing in corporate fraud and elder abuse defense. I need a man who plays chess, not checkers." Ilara didn't hesitate. "Consider it done. The ghost account will be active within 12 hours. For legal counsel, I recommend Julian Rhodes in New York. He is a legend in corporate law, known for his cold efficiency and ability to anticipate every countermove. He is expensive, and he only accepts cases that interest him. Robert anticipated this and set aside a retainer sufficient to buy his full attention. The word retainer was an understatement. Robert hadn't just reserved a lawyer, he had reserved an entire army. My next step was to find physical evidence. The digital recordings and documents were explosive, but a physical document was often more compelling in court. Robert's cryptic clue, "Seek the next piece of art," still lingered. It wasn't about another NFT, it was a distraction. The truth must be hidden in plain sight, in the house. I remembered a small, unassuming fireproof safe behind a false panel in the master bedroom closet. My children had searched the main safe downstairs, but they would never have thought to look there. I used the safe's combination the day Robert and I first saw the Medici crest in Italy, 03 to 24, 1981. The small door clicked open. Inside, I found a single, non-digital item, a thick manila envelope labeled "The Collection Artifacts." I pulled it out, my hands shaking. Inside were neatly organized, damning physical records. The original will, Robert's actual last testament, dated a year prior, which explicitly left me everything except the publicly listed company shares, which were to be held in a trust controlled by me. The official will read by Rose was an outright fabrication. Banking records, a paper trail showing Liam's covert $3 million transfers from his company account to a series of high-risk crypto gambling platforms in the Caribbean. The dates matched the audio recordings where Liam said, "The old man is getting weaker." The deed, a copy of the deed to the main family residence, which Robert had legally transferred into my sole name 6 months before his death. Liam and Chloe's plan to sell the house was based on a lie they believed about the public records. The Willow Creek contract, a signed contract between Liam, Chloe, and a private high-security assisted living facility named Willow Creek Senior Sanctuary, 3 hours outside Boston. It was dated just 2 weeks before Robert's death. They weren't just planning this. They had already secured my prison cell. This was not just proof of greed and incompetence. This was proof of conspiracy to commit fraud and false imprisonment. Robert hadn't just given me money. He had given me an unassailable legal arsenal. The game had shifted from a sad drama into a high-stakes corporate and criminal thriller, and I was holding all the winning cards. I picked up the satellite phone and dialed Ilara again. "The time for subtlety is over," I told her. "I need Julian Rhodes here, in this house, within 48 hours. And I need a security detail that will make my children think twice before touching me." The realization of my children's monstrous plan, to commit me to an isolated facility and sell the house that was legally mine, did 2 things to me. First, it burned away the last vestiges of my grief for Robert, replacing it with a steely resolve. Second, it forced me to confront the past. Robert's clue, "The value is not the money but the truth," now resonated with chilling clarity. He hadn't just given me the antidote, he had given me the poison. The truth was the most valuable and the most dangerous weapon I possessed. I spent the next 48 hours in a blur of intense activity, fueled by the $300 million digital lifeline and the expertise of Ilara Vance and Julian Rhodes. Julian, an ice-cold legal strategist, arrived from New York in a private jet, looking less like a lawyer and more like a high-end corporate assassin in an immaculate bespoke suit. He didn't waste a single second on pleasantries. "Mrs. Herrera, your husband was a genius," Julian stated, his voice a low, gravelly monotone as he reviewed the physical documents from the safe. "This fabricated will is useless. Your husband transferred ownership of the house to you. and the primary corporate assets are protected by a complex DAO structure outside of US estate laws. They inherited the shell. You inherited the core. He tapped the contract for Willow Creek Senior Sanctuary. This, however, is criminal. We have definitive proof of conspiracy. The challenge is, do we pursue criminal charges, or do we use this as leverage to force them into a non-disclosure agreement and recovery plan? My mind was already made up. I want the criminal element to be public, but the revenge must be surgical, Julian. I want to shatter their reputation and their self-importance. I want them to lose everything they value, starting with their sense of entitlement, before they even realize I'm fighting back. Julian Rhodes smiled, a tight, thin line that made him look utterly menacing. A spectacular corporate and social dismantling. I can arrange that. My first move was to execute Robert's plan to reveal the truth to the outside world. Robert had compiled a detailed dossier, physical copies and digital backups, detailing the specific, shocking crimes committed by my children. I instructed Alara to create a secure, untraceable Dropbox for the documents. I then contacted Mitchell Reed, the investigative journalist Robert had discreetly helped years ago. Mitchell had built a career on exposing financial and social fraud among the Boston elite. "Mitchell, this is Martha Herrera, Robert Herrera's widow," I said over the satellite phone. "I have information that will blow the lid off the so-called Herrera legacy, but it needs to be an anonymous leak. I need you to find a story that writes itself, a story of unbelievable betrayal and corporate malfeasance." I sent him the anonymous link to the Dropbox containing all the evidence: Liam's $3 million gambling ledger, the internal memos proving Chloe's charity was a money laundering front, and, most damningly, the signed contract showing they prepaid for my long-term commitment at Willow Creek. The timing had to be perfect. My plan was to use the media leak to completely isolate Liam and Chloe, creating maximum social shock just before I launched the legal counterattack. My second move was to hire a team. Robert's original corporate lawyer, Rose, was now a threat. I needed control of the one institution they still respected, Herrera Tech. Julian quickly identified the single person with the most control over the board: Marcus Thorne, the chief financial officer. Marcus had been Robert's right-hand man for 30 years. He was honorable, meticulous, and deeply respected by the staff. He had also been consistently sidelined by Liam since Robert's death. I arranged a clandestine meeting with Marcus at a small, neutral location, a public library reading room far from our usual haunts. Marcus was visibly stressed and exhausted. "Martha, I don't know what's happening," he confessed, his voice low and ragged. "Liam is a disaster. He's draining the company's reserves with reckless investments. He's using company capital to buy up high-risk crypto assets without board approval. The financial structure Robert built is collapsing." I opened my briefcase and slid a single file across the table. It was the transcript of Liam's call discussing his gambling debts and a forged company transfer. Marcus picked it up, read the document, and his face went white. "My God," he whispered. "He's stealing from the company. This is a criminal offense." "It is," I confirmed, keeping my voice level. "But he doesn't know what I know. Robert didn't leave you behind, Marcus. He made me the sole owner of the holding company that controls the core equity. Liam inherited a puppet company with no actual value." I then showed him the Willow Creek contract. Marcus stared at the prepaid commitment form, the dates, the signatures of Liam and Chloe, and the name of the sham doctor. "They are trying to commit you," he said, his voice laced with disgust. "They are," I replied, "and they are about to make their move. I need you to hold the line, Marcus. I need you to protect the employees and the company values Robert held so dear. When the press hits, I need you to call an emergency board meeting, cite gross negligence and criminal malfeasance, and prepare the paperwork to freeze all of Liam's active corporate accounts. Marcus nodded slowly, the shock giving way to resolve. Robert would have wanted this. I'm in, Martha. Tell me what to do. Wait for the signal, I instructed. Wait for the noise. Then strike with surgical precision. I left the library, feeling a powerful mixture of adrenaline and purpose. I was no longer the grieving widow. I was the architect of a spectacular, inescapable downfall. The pieces were now in place: the legal shark, the silent security, the media assassin, and the inside man. The stage was set for the children's next move, the trap they were about to walk right into. I just needed to wait for them to approach the cage they had built for me. The moment I pressed send on the satellite phone, confirming the transfer of the $5 million operational fund and setting the arrival of Julian Rhodes and the security team, a sudden, unnerving silence fell over the house. I knew my children were circling. They had been unnaturally quiet since the reading of the will, giving me space to grieve, which I knew was code for waiting for the right moment to strike. The stillness was broken 24 hours later by the sharp, insistent peal of the doorbell. I checked the live feed from the newly installed security cameras. Standing on the porch were Liam, Chloe, and Mark, but they weren't alone. With them was an older man in a generic grey suit, carrying a black leather medical bag. This was it. The ambush. The doctor on the payroll they had secured to declare me mentally unfit. I quickly composed myself, took a deep breath, and instructed my newly arrived security chief, a formidable former military woman named Ava, to remain out of sight, but within immediate earshot. I opened the door myself, forcing a look of frail confusion onto my face. "Oh, hello, children," I said, my voice deliberately weak. What a surprise. I wasn't expecting visitors. Liam stepped forward, instantly adopting the persona of the concerned, dutiful son. "Mum, we've been worried sick about you," he said, his voice too loud, too forced. "You've been so quiet. We brought a specialist, Dr. Hayes, just to check on you, make sure you're coping well." "Dr. Hayes is a geriatrics specialist," Chloe chirped, holding a glossy brochure that looked suspiciously like the one for Willow Creek Senior Sanctuary. "He's just going to ask you a few simple questions, Mum, for your peace of mind." I let them shepherd me into the living room, observing their choreography. Liam took the armchair opposite me, positioning himself to block my direct view of the hall. Chloe placed the brochure prominently on the coffee table. Mark hovered near the door, acting as the nervous lookout. They were following their script perfectly. Dr. Hayes sat down, pulled out a notepad and pen, and smiled with an unsettling amount of false sincerity. "Hello, Mrs. Herrera. Just a routine check-in. Can you tell me what day of the week it is?" I played the role of the hesitant, slightly confused old lady. "It's Thursday, isn't it, dear? I lose track these days." It was actually Friday, and I knew it. Liam shot Chloe a triumphant look. The trap was springing shut. Dr. Hayes leaned in conspiratorially. "And can you tell me about the will reading, Mrs. Herrera? How did you feel about the distribution of Robert's assets?" This was the key question, the one designed to make me appear either delusional, if I mentioned the 300 million, or emotionally broken, if I lamented the dusty box. "Oh, the will," I said, letting a slight tremor enter my voice. "I remember it perfectly. My children took the companies and the properties, the $55 million, and I received a small box." I paused, letting the humiliation settle on them. A very dusty box. Liam looked away, unable to meet my eyes, clearly enjoying my public admission of worthlessness. "And how did that make you feel, Mrs. Herrera?" Dr. Hayes pressed, scribbling furiously on his notepad. "Did you feel abandoned, unprotected?" I felt, I said, finally lifting my eyes and looking directly at Liam, like a woman who finally understood the true nature of her family. My tone was low, but the shift was palpable. Liam's smirk vanished. Chloe's smile faltered. They thought I was confessing resentment, a symptom they could exploit. Dr. Hayes wrapped up his assessment. Well, Mrs. Herrera, based on your visible stress and mild cognitive confusion regarding the date, I believe it would be highly beneficial for you to spend a few days under observation. We have a quiet, comfortable facility where you can rest without the burden of this big house. Chloe immediately jumped in, pointing to the brochure. Willow Creek, Mum. It's beautiful. They have painting classes and therapy, just for a few weeks. Just until we can get your affairs sorted, Liam added, moving from his armchair towards me, a predatory look in his eyes. No, thank you, I replied, my voice now dropping its feigned weakness. It was firm, steel-edged, and completely unexpected. I am perfectly capable of sorting my own affairs. Liam stopped dead in his tracks. Mum, this isn't a suggestion. The doctor believes you need specialized care. We have the legal authority. The legal authority? I interrupted, standing up slowly. I walked over to Robert's study desk, placing my hand on the cold wood. You mean the fake legal authority you forged a week before your father died? The air in the room seemed to solidify. Liam's jaw dropped. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth, and her eyes, usually so calculating, were now wide with pure terror. Mark froze by the doorway. I don't know what you're talking about, Mum, Liam stammered, his facade cracking completely. You're confusing things. We are just trying to help you. Help me? I echoed, pulling out a sealed document from my pocket, a document Julian Rhodes had prepared. I'm talking about this. I held up a copy of the deed, clearly showing the legal transfer of the house into my sole name. The deed to this house was transferred to me 6 months ago. You have no right to sell it, and you certainly have no right to enter it without my permission. I then pulled out the copy of the Willow Creek contract. I didn't unfold it. I simply showed them the distinctive logo and the prepaid deposit date. I'm also talking about this, Liam, I continued, my voice low and dangerous. The contract you signed and prepaid, 2 weeks before your father's funeral, to lock me away like an old dog. Tell me, Dr. Hayes, I addressed the imposter, was the $5,000 they paid you worth an immediate investigation into elder abuse and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment? The fake doctor visibly recoiled, his face turning an alarming shade of grey. He grabbed his briefcase and stumbled backward towards the door, desperate to escape the trap I had sprung. But before he reached it, the front door opened, and Eva, my security chief, stepped into the living room, blocking the exit. Her presence was a silent, powerful warning. Stay exactly where you are, I commanded, my voice resonating with an authority none of them had ever heard before. The conversation has changed, children. Now, we talk about the $300 million. The tension in the living room was so thick it was almost unbearable. Liam was white with shock, his expensive suit now looking ridiculous on his suddenly small, pathetic frame. Chloe was staring at the floor, whimpering softly, her veneer of socialite glamour completely dissolved. Mark, the supposed lookout, was pressing himself against the wall, trying to disappear entirely. And the fake Dr. Hayes was now trapped by Eva, my security chief, who stood between him and the front door like a granite statue. I walked slowly to the coffee table and picked up the glossy brochure for Willow Creek Senior Sanctuary. I didn't look at it. I simply tore it in half, then in quarters, letting the expensive paper flutter to the ground. You wanted to know how I felt about the dusty box, I said, my voice resonating with a power I hadn't known I possessed. I felt liberated, because it told me everything about you, and everything about your father's genius. Liam finally found his voice, a high-pitched, desperate sound. "Mum, you're delusional. The box contained nothing. The house is part of the estate. You're confused." I turned the screen of Robert's old laptop toward them. It still displayed the enormous balance of the first digital wallet. 100 counted. "Do I look confused, Liam?" I asked. "The $55 million you divided was the distraction, the surface noise. Robert was a tech mogul. He understood that the real wealth of the future is untraceable, decentralized, and hidden in plain sight. This is the beginning of the real inheritance." I clicked through to the NFT collection, displaying the rare digital artifacts. "The collection," I stated, "is valued at over $300 million. It is registered under a DAO with me as the sole, irrevocable beneficiary." "And you?" I looked at Chloe. "You inherited nothing but a massive amount of debt and a severe criminal investigation into your fake charity." Chloe stopped whimpering and lifted her head, her eyes flashing with defiance. "That's a lie. Our foundation is legitimate. You can't prove anything." I smiled, a cold, empty gesture. "Oh, Chloe, your father loved you too much to send you to prison without a fight. He just chose to let me fight it for him." I pulled the satellite phone from my pocket and activated the speaker. A clear, high-quality audio recording began to play, instantly filling the room. It was the conversation I had heard previously, but this time it was being amplified through the sophisticated device. "We need to speed up the plan. The old man is getting weaker." Liam's voice. "I'm already in debt, Liam. We need that money now. The foundation is getting too much attention from the wrong people." Chloe's voice. "Don't worry, we have the fake will. We have the doctor. Once she's in Willow Creek, we sell the house, and we pay off our debts to the syndicate." Mark's voice. I let the recording play to the very end. The silence that followed was absolute. "That's enough," I said, shutting off the recording. "Liam, we have the ledger for your $3 million gambling transfers, signed by your own hand. Chloe, we have the invoices detailing the money laundering through your charity. And Mark, we have the paperwork showing your direct involvement in planning my false imprisonment at Willow Creek." The fake doctor, seeing his escape route blocked and hearing the evidence, suddenly slumped against the wall, covering his face. "I was just paid $5,000, he muttered. "I didn't know the scope of it." "You were paid to sign papers stating I was insane," I shot back. "That's why Robert left me the truth. Because the truth is what you didn't deserve to know." Liam, ever the corporate manipulator, quickly regained some composure. He tried to appeal to my motherly instincts, his final resort. "Mum, please. We are your children. We made mistakes, bad investments. But that money, the $300 million, it should stay in the family. Let us help you manage it. We can pay off our debts, and we can work to earn your trust back. We're sorry." "Sorry?" I repeated, stepping closer to him, my eyes fixed on his. "You were planning to destroy my life, not save yours. You gambled away the physical company, and you planned to steal the house your father put in my name. You think an apology is enough to cover conspiracy and fraud?" I didn't give him a chance to answer. I walked over to Robert's study desk and picked up a clean, unused satellite phone. This was the one Ilara had provided for my direct, secure contact with the outside world. "This is not a negotiation, Liam. This is a surrender. I have activated an internal audit of all Herrera Tech finances, led by Marcus Thorne. I also have Julian Rhodes, the most ruthless corporate defense attorney in New York, preparing the final legal documents." I dialed the phone. The call connected instantly. "Julian," I said, my voice calm. "The children are here. They have confessed to the conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. We have the audio confirmation, the transfer records, and the Willow Creek contract. Proceed with the immediate surgical strike. The moment I hung up, the atmosphere changed again. Liam's eyes widened as he realized the name I had just spoken. Julian Rhodes, the man who could ruin him instantly. Chloe began to sob uncontrollably, the performance now completely real. "Mum, please, don't ruin us. We won't survive this." "You chose this, Chloe," I stated without pity. "Your father gave you everything, and you chose greed and crime. You will face the consequences of your choices." I looked at Eva, standing tall by the door. "Eva, escort Dr. Hayes and Mark out of the house. They are to be held for questioning by Julian's team and then handed over to the Boston Police Department for conspiracy charges. Do not let them speak to Liam or Chloe." Mark, upon hearing the words police department, let out a choked cry and tried to bolt, but Eva smoothly grabbed his arm and pinned him to the wall with brutal efficiency. I turned back to my children, who were now paralyzed with fear. "You think you can take my money and lock me away? You were wrong. You underestimated the quiet woman who always sat in the kitchen. You forgot that I was the one who listened to your father every night for 42 years. I know more about business, about secrets, and about the darkness in your hearts than you could ever imagine." "Now," I commanded, my voice dropping to a decisive whisper. "It is time for the social dismantling, the destruction of your carefully constructed public images, the final, spectacular fall." The confrontation had shattered their world. Liam and Chloe stood frozen, their faces masks of disbelief and dawning horror. They had encountered a ghost, the woman they thought was invisible, now wielding a terrifying triple-digit fortune and an arsenal of legal and criminal evidence. I didn't give them a moment to regain their footing. The goal now was total social destruction, a public humiliation so profound it would make their corporate collapse the least of their worries. "Mark and the fake doctor are gone," I stated, watching as Eva confirmed the perimeter was secure. "Their problems are now with the Boston Police Department. Your problems, however, are just beginning." I walked over to the antique globe Robert had kept in the corner and spun it slowly. "You think my revenge is about taking back the money?" "No. Robert protected the money. My revenge is about taking back the narrative. It's about ensuring that the name Herrera is remembered for integrity, not for the fraud and pathetic greed of his children." Chloe, tears streaming down her face, finally managed a plea. "Mum, please. Think about my brand, my followers. This will destroy my entire social image, everything I've built." I stopped the globe with my finger on Geneva. "Built, Chloe. You built a facade on your father's money, using a fake charity to launder stolen funds. Do you think I care about your followers, the same ones who you planned to defraud further?" I picked up the satellite phone again and dialed a number I had been given by Julian Rhodes. It connected to Mitchell Reed, the investigative journalist in New York, who had been waiting for my signal. "Mitchell," I said, my voice crisp and authoritative. "The moment has arrived. You are clear to publish the exposé. I want the headline to be undeniable, referencing the immediate collapse of the Herrera Tech subsidiary, citing gross negligence and immediate criminal proceedings. Use the full dossier." I turned the speaker function on so Liam could hear every word. "I also want you to specifically detail the expenditures of the Chloe Herrera Charitable Fund. Do not hold back the details of the luxury vacations and the designer shopping sprees funded by charity donations. I want the public to see exactly where the money went." Liam, listening to his company's reputation being destroyed in real time, lunged forward. "You can't do this. That's corporate suicide. You're ruining the Herrera name." Eva moved quickly, stepping between us and pushing Liam back with a single practiced motion. He hit the wall with a hollow thud. "I'm saving the Herrera name, Liam," I corrected him. "You and Chloe are merely being erased from its history." The social media aspect was equally critical. Chloe's world was built on appearances. I contacted Ilara Vance again and gave her precise instructions. "Ilara, I need you to deploy a social media strike force. Target every platform Chloe uses. I want a simultaneous, anonymous leak of her personal accounting ledgers alongside her latest philanthropic posts. I want the public to see her posting about saving the world, while simultaneously viewing the balance sheets detailing her misuse of funds. I want the irony to be a spectacle." Within the hour, the first tremors hit. Liam's phone, which he had dropped on the floor, began buzzing incessantly. Chloe's phone, which she was still clutching, started displaying notifications at an alarming rate. Chloe picked up her phone, her eyes scanning the screen, and she let out a piercing shriek. "My God, it's everywhere! The Sun, the Post, Tech Air implicated in financial fraud and elder abuse plot. Liam, look! My foundation's page is being flooded with angry comments. They're calling me a fraud." Liam retrieved his phone, his face contorted with fury and panic. "The board is calling. They're asking about the $3 million. Marcus Thorne called an emergency meeting. They're freezing all my accounts." I stood back, observing the spectacle of their public dismantling. This was the socialized revenge, using the very transparency of the modern world to expose their hidden corruption. Then, Julian Rhodes called me back on the secure line. "Mrs. Herrera, the media response is explosive. The social isolation is complete. Now for the legal hammer." "Proceed, Julian," I said, looking at Liam, who was frantically trying to call his now useless corporate attorney. Julian then publicly announced that Martha Herrera, the sole owner of the actual holding company, was launching a complete corporate restructuring of Herrera Tech, citing Liam Herrera's gross negligence and alleged criminal activity. He also filed a temporary restraining order against both children, legally forbidding them from coming within 500 feet of me or the family residence. The humiliation peaked when I received a text from Mitchell Reed. He had published an interview with an anonymous source, a former employee of Liam's, who confirmed that Liam had been openly gambling away company funds, bragging that his stupid old mother would pay for everything when the time came. Chloe, upon reading the online comments, began to hyperventilate. The loss of her image, the destruction of her carefully constructed self, was more painful than the loss of the money. "You've ruined us, Mum," Liam growled, his eyes burning with hatred. "You've completely ruined us. This is not justice. This is cruelty." I looked at him, feeling a sudden, profound sense of detachment, not hatred. "Cruelty, Liam? Cruelty was paying for my prison cell while planning my eulogy. You wanted a public life? You'll get one. Now listen carefully, because this is my final offer before the criminal charges are filed." I pulled out a document prepared by Julian, a stark, simple ultimatum. "You will surrender all remaining assets immediately. You will provide a full, itemized account of every penny you stole. And you will prepare yourselves, because your redemption will be public, painful, and entirely on my terms." The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Outside the living room, the sounds of my security team escorting Mark and the fake Dr. Hayes were muffled, but the reality was deafening. Liam and Chloe were stripped bare. Their social currency was worthless, their corporate power was gone, and their freedom was now contingent on my mercy. Liam, however, retained a flicker of his old arrogance. He gripped the back of an armchair, his knuckles white. "You can't do this, Mum," he snarled, his voice a tight whisper of denial. "You are just a bitter old woman. This digital money, this Dow, it will never hold up in court. The public will see this as a cruel, vindictive revenge plot. They will turn against you." The public already knows you plan to institutionalize your mother to settle gambling debts, Liam, I countered, my tone flat. They know Chloe used the Martha Herrera legacy fund to buy designer bags. Your father ensured the digital money is protected by structures you wouldn't understand. And Julian Rhodes, my lawyer, is currently preparing a very detailed affidavit for the district attorney. You think the public will side with the son who committed corporate fraud, or the mother who used her inheritance to found a massive charity dedicated to fighting elder abuse. The mention of the district attorney silenced him completely. I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of losing money. He was afraid of losing his freedom. Chloe, kneeling by the couch, looked up, her face tear-streaked and desperate. "What do you want, Mum? Tell us. We'll sign anything. We'll give you the rest of the $30 million back. Just don't let them put me in prison." "The $30 million is now irrelevant," I stated. "That money, the public portion of Robert's assets, is what I will use to fund your rehabilitation and restitution. You will not simply walk away. You will earn your redemption. And the first step is absolute, unreserved confession." I picked up the document Julian had prepared. It wasn't a formal legal release. It was a brutally honest confession of wrongdoing and a detailed plan for restitution. "Liam, you will sign this, stating you willfully and knowingly used company funds for high-risk private gambling debts, totaling $3 million. You will publicly resign from all board and executive positions, effective immediately, and you will agree to work for the Herrera Tech subsidiary, starting at the lowest possible level, manual labor, earning a minimum wage until every penny of those $3 million is repaid." Liam stared at me, aghast. "Manual labor? Mum, I'm a CEO. I have an MBA from Wharton. I can't carry bricksticks." "You gambled away a legacy, Liam," I said without emotion. "You can certainly carry bricks. You will understand what it means to earn money honestly, minute by minute, just as your father did when he started." I turned to Chloe. "You will sign this, detailing the exact amounts stolen from your so-called charity and how those funds were misappropriated for personal gain. You will forfeit all your current assets, which will be liquidated to repay the charitable fund." Chloe nodded weakly, her carefully constructed world shattered around her. "But your punishment, Chloe," I continued, "will be more difficult. You will work for me, not for the corporate side. You will work in the new foundation I am establishing, dedicated to fighting the very type of fraud you perpetrated. You will assist the victims of financial abuse, and you will earn your salary by genuinely helping those you once planned to hurt." This was the first twist of the humanitarian revenge. Their atonement would be a public performance of genuine service, a painful, daily reminder of their past sins. Liam, defeated, finally asked the critical question. "If we do all this, Mom, the public resignation, the labor, the charity work, will you stop the criminal charges?" "I will hold the criminal charges," I clarified. "Julian will issue a statement confirming that, due to my personal intervention and my children's complete and total cooperation in the internal audit, the legal proceedings will be held in abeyance, pending their full restitution and adherence to this agreement. You will be on a very short leash, Liam. One wrong move, one lie, and the affidavit goes straight to the district attorney." I then added the ultimate safeguard, the twist that ensured their loyalty was permanent. "Furthermore, both of you must understand this clearly. The entire $300 million digital fortune is dedicated to the new Martha Herrera Foundation. You will never, ever inherit another cent of it. However, if you complete your restitution and prove, over the next 5 years, that you have genuinely changed and are committed to integrity, you will be granted positions on the Foundation's board, not as owners, but as servants of the community. You will have a voice, a purpose, and a chance to build a legacy of good rather than a legacy of greed. This was the final devastating blow. The realization that the enormous wealth, the true prize, was forever out of their reach, dedicated to a cause greater than themselves. They would have to live in the shadow of the fortune they almost killed their mother for, knowing that it was now being used to save the vulnerable. Liam slowly walked toward the desk, his body language broken. He picked up the pen, his hands shaking, and signed the resignation and confession. Chloe followed, weeping silently as she signed away her brand and her assets. The confrontation was over. The siege was lifted. I had won, not by taking their life, but by forcing them to rebuild it on foundations of honest work and service. "Eva," I said, my voice tired but resolute, "escort them out of the house. They are to leave immediately and are not permitted to return until they begin their required work tomorrow morning. The era of entitlement is over." As my children were led out the door, two broken shadows of their former selves, I walked over to the window. The house was quiet again. The $300 million was safe. My freedom was secured. But the real work, the work of building a new legacy and finding my own voice, was just beginning. The morning after the confrontation felt surreal. Liam and Chloe were gone, their chaos replaced by an unfamiliar, determined silence. Mark and the imposter doctor were in police custody, thanks to Julian Rhodes' rapid legal maneuvering. But the hardest work was just beginning, transforming the $300 million from a digital fortress into a real-world force for good, and simultaneously dismantling the public image of a corrupt dynasty. My first order of business was the press conference. I didn't want the spectacle of vengeance, but I needed the full weight of the media to legitimize my control and secure the moral high ground. I instructed Julian to book the Grand Ballroom at the Four Seasons in Boston, the same room where Robert had held his annual corporate galas, a location chosen specifically for its symbolic importance. I didn't step onto the stage to mourn or to accuse. I stepped onto the stage as Martha Herrera, the CEO of a newly reformed holding company and the founder of a massive charitable enterprise. "Good morning," I began, looking out at the sea of reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. The Herrera family has endured a period of profound difficulty. While the passing of my husband, Robert Herrera, was tragic, the subsequent actions of certain individuals have been deeply disappointing. I then dropped the bomb. I didn't mention the $300 million directly. That was for the accountants. I spoke about the fraud. I have today completed a full corporate restructuring of all Herrera interests. This was necessitated by the discovery of severe financial mismanagement and gross negligence by the former CEO, Liam Herrera. Due to his extensive gambling debts and reckless transfers, totaling over $3 million, he has been immediately and permanently removed from all corporate boards and executive positions. The room erupted. Reporters scrambled, shouting questions about where Liam was and if criminal charges were imminent. I waited for the noise to subside, then delivered the second, more crushing blow. Furthermore, the so-called Chloe Herrera Charitable Fund has been exposed as a money laundering front. Funds designated for genuine causes were systematically diverted for the personal use of its founder. This foundation has been dissolved, and all assets are being immediately liquidated to repay the charitable donations that were stolen. This was the core of the social collapse. Liam was a corporate failure. Chloe was a moral failure. The public would forgive gambling debts, but they would never forgive stealing from charity. But the real twist, the socialized humanitarian revenge, came next. "However," I announced, raising my voice to cut through the noise, "the Herrera legacy will not be defined by the corruption of a few. It will be defined by the vision of Robert Herrera." I am here today to announce the formation of the Robert and Martha Herrera Foundation for Financial Integrity and Elder Dignity. I explained that the foundation would be funded by a massive, immediate, and fully public grant from the family's assets. I stated that its mission was twofold. First, to provide legal aid and financial resources for older Americans who are victims of financial fraud and abuse by their own family members, the very crime my children had attempted. Second, to provide corporate oversight training to prevent the kind of internal theft Liam had committed. I then unveiled the final, perfect detail. The Foundation's initial staff will be comprised entirely of former victims and forensic accountants dedicated to transparency. And as for my children, Liam Herrera and Chloe Herrera, they have signed a legally binding restitution agreement. They will not walk away free. I paused, letting the weight of the sentence settle. Liam Herrera will begin tomorrow, working as an unpaid manual laborer for the Herrera construction subsidiary, earning minimum wage for his living expenses until the $3 million in stolen funds is repaid. Chloe Herrera will begin working immediately for the new foundation, assisting the victims of fraud, the very people she planned to victimize. Their path to redemption begins with service and sweat. The room was speechless. This was not the typical corporate scandal where the heirs simply vanished with golden parachutes. This was a public, painful, and highly visible demotion, a televised public shaming that forced them into visible atonement. It satisfied the public hunger for justice, while keeping the criminal threat, the prison sentence, hanging over them. As the press conference concluded, I took a private moment with Marcus Thorne, the newly reinstated CFO. "The chaos is magnificent, Martha," Marcus said, a genuine look of awe on his face. "But the staff is reeling. The clients are terrified. We need stability." "Stability comes from truth, Marcus," I replied. "I need you to call a full employee town hall meeting. I want to meet every person who works for Herrera Tech. I want them to see the owner of the company, not a spoiled heir. I want them to hear directly from me that their pensions are safe, their jobs are secure, and that the only thing leaving this company are the criminal elements. My world, once small and confined to the domestic sphere, was suddenly enormous, filled with corporate strategy, media management, and humanitarian planning. The dusty wooden box hadn't just given me money, it had given me a throne, a voice, and a purpose larger than anything I had ever known. I realized that Robert had not only saved me from my children, he had saved me from the limitations of my own invisible life. And now, I was ready to wield that power. The aftermath of the press conference was a storm of public fury and media scrutiny. Liam and Chloe, stripped of their titles and their illusions, were forced to face their new reality. This chapter, however, was about my transformation from the victim into the architect of change, and the painful initiation of my children into the world of genuine work. My first act as the new head of the Herrera empire was to address the employees of Herrera Tech. Marcus Thorne, the newly appointed interim CEO, had organized a mandatory town hall in the company's main manufacturing plant. When I walked onto the makeshift stage, dressed in a simple but sharp navy suit, I wasn't met with applause, but with wary silence. These people had seen their pensions threatened by Liam's recklessness. They didn't trust a grieving widow to save their jobs. "My name is Martha Herrera," I began, my voice amplified by the microphone, cutting through the vast space. "For 42 years, I was Robert Herrera's partner. I know many of you are concerned about the future of this company. Let me be clear. The era of entitlement, recklessness, and financial fraud is over." I spoke not about the $300 million fortune, but about the security of their jobs, the integrity of the supply chain, and the immediate restoration of all employee benefits Liam had secretly cut to fund his gambling. I announced the establishment of a profit-sharing trust using a portion of the digital assets, ensuring that if the company flourished, every employee would directly benefit. I promised transparency, integrity, and a return to Robert's core values. The applause that followed was slow at first, then built into a genuine, roaring affirmation of loyalty. They didn't see a rich widow. They saw a leader fighting for them. Meanwhile, my children's restitution had begun. Liam's first day as a manual labourer at the Herrera construction site was a spectacle. Julian Rhodes had insisted on sending a single discreet photographer to document the moment for insurance purposes, and the photo quickly found its way to Mitchell Reed. The image of Liam, the former CEO with the Wharton MBA, standing in dusty, ill-fitting work boots, clumsily hauling bags of concrete mix, was a powerful visual testament to the phrase, "How the mighty have fallen." Liam's former employees, the construction foremen and labourers he had consistently looked down on, were now his supervisors. They didn't show pity. They showed the harsh, unforgiving efficiency of the working world. Liam, exhausted and covered in sweat, tried to argue with his foreman, demanding better tasks, citing his education. The foreman, a man named Rico, simply pointed to the shovel. "Your education means nothing here, Liam," Rico stated flatly. "You signed a contract. Your name is liability now. You earn your right to speak with honest work. Now get back to that truck." Chloe's initiation was equally brutal, but psychologically damaging. Her work for the new Martha Herrera Foundation began in the basement of a quiet office building, surrounded by boxes of financial aid applications. Her task was to categorize and process the files of older women who had been victims of family financial abuse, the exact victims she had planned to create. Her first client, a 70-year-old woman named Evelyn, had lost her entire retirement savings to a scheme orchestrated by her own grandson. Evelyn's story was heartbreaking and familiar, a mirror of my own planned fate. Chloe, accustomed to discussing designer shoes and Bali retreats, was forced to listen to the brutal, monotonous details of fraud. "He promised me he would double the money, dear," Evelyn tearfully told Chloe. "He was my favourite. I trusted him with everything." Chloe, who was supposed to be comforting the woman, suddenly ran out of the room, vomiting in the nearest bathroom. The reality of her actions, the human cost of her greed, was hitting her with visceral force. She was forced to confront the wreckage of her moral landscape daily. I received daily reports from Ilara Vance and Julian Rhodes, detailing their progress and my children's reactions. Liam complained constantly about the exhaustion and the degradation. Chloe protested that the work was too depressing and emotionally draining. "They are experiencing consequences, Martha," Julian reported dryly. "The humiliation is the catalyst. They have to face the music before they can sing a new song. I made a deliberate choice not to see them. I refused to accept their phone calls or their self-pitying texts. My focus was entirely on building the foundation. I channeled the $300 million into establishing a nationwide legal aid network and creating the Digital Integrity Task Force, dedicated to helping older citizens navigate and protect their assets in the digital world. I was no longer Martha, the wife. I was Martha, the founder. I was the woman who sat in marathon board meetings, negotiated with major banks, and spoke with senators about elder protection laws. My background in art history, the ability to find patterns and expose concealed narratives, translated perfectly into corporate and humanitarian strategy. One afternoon, Marcus Thorne walked into my new office with an expression of disbelief. "Martha, you need to see this," he said, handing me a printout of an online news comment. The comment was posted by an anonymous user named Liam H. It was a simple, short paragraph posted beneath an article detailing my foundation's work. "My mother is right," the comment read. I was a thief and a fool. I deserved to be here. I just wish I had learned this lesson before I lost my father. The raw honesty of the admission, stripped of all arrogance and self-pity, hit me with unexpected force. It was the first genuine sign of introspection, a small crack in the concrete wall of their denial. It was the first, faint echo of the honest men Robert had hoped they would become. I closed my eyes, allowing myself a single brief moment of complex hope. My revenge was not just about breaking them, it was, finally, about the chance to mend them. Một năm đã trôi qua kể từ ngày tôi nhận chiếc hộp gỗ cũ kỹ. Cuộc sống của tôi, của công ty và của chính các con tôi đã trải qua một sự chuyển đổi không thể tin được. Giờ đây, tôi không còn là người phụ nữ 65 tuổi yếu đuối, mà là Martha Herrera, nhà sáng lập được kính trọng và là một nữ doanh nhân cứng rắn. The mansion no longer felt hollow. It felt energized, filled with the purposeful efficiency of Julian Rhodes' legal team and the genuine warmth of the foundation staff. The $300 million wasn't just safe, it was actively saving lives. I had achieved the ultimate victory, not just securing my own future, but using the fortune to create a public safety net against the very crime my children had attempted. Liam's term of manual labor had ended 6 months prior. He completed the full repayment of the $3 million he stole, not in cash, but in sweat equity. I hadn't seen him during that time, but Marcus Thorne's reports were consistent. Liam had become quieter, leaner, and unexpectedly good with his hands. He earned the respect of the construction crews. Chloe's journey was more painful, but ultimately more profound. Her forced work for the foundation, initially met with disgust, slowly turned into a genuine passion. She had moved from processing aid applications to leading group therapy sessions for victims of financial fraud. She possessed a unique, if hard-won, insight into the mechanisms of betrayal, allowing her to connect with the victims in a way no professional could. She was earning her purpose, day by day. One crisp autumn afternoon, I received a short, handwritten note from Liam, the first piece of non-legal communication I had received from him since the confrontation. It simply read, "Mum, I've earned back my honesty. Can I earn back my sonship?" I agreed to meet him at the Foundation's new headquarters, a beautiful building I purchased using a fraction of the digital fortune. I chose this location because it symbolized everything he had lost and everything he could still gain. Liam walked in, wearing a simple, clean suit, not the expensive designer suits of his past life. He looked me in the eye, and there was no trace of the arrogance or contempt I had seen before. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mum," he said, his voice husky. "But I wanted you to know that the $3 million was the easy part. The hard part was realizing that I killed Dad. Not physically, but I broke his heart with my greed, and I almost did the same to you. I'm sorry." The confession was raw, unforced, and real. It was the moment I had waited for. "Your father knew you were capable of change, Liam. He left me the tools to force that change." The reunion with Chloe was equally emotional. She came to me a week later, not asking for forgiveness, but asking for a raise for one of her team members who was a single mother. She was advocating for someone else, a monumental shift from her self-serving past. "I understand now what Dad built, Mum," Chloe confessed, tears in her eyes. "It wasn't a business. It was a community, and I destroyed my part of it. Working with Evelyn and the others, the victims, made me realize I was becoming the monster I hated. I looked at my children, not as the conspirators who betrayed me, but as two deeply flawed human beings who had paid the ultimate price for their mistakes and were fighting their way back. The criminal charges against them, held in abeyance by Julian Rhodes, were now permanently dismissed. They had completed their restitution. My victory was complete. It wasn't the sound of a prison door slamming shut. It was the sound of a fractured family slowly beginning to heal. Robert had given me justice, but I had chosen to use it to create redemption. Today, I still run the Herrera Empire, focusing its vast resources entirely on socially responsible projects. Liam, restored to a non-executive, highly vetted position, is now a valuable project manager for the construction company, focusing on the foundation's affordable housing initiatives. Chloe is the director of victim advocacy for the foundation, the public face of its humanitarian efforts. They will never inherit the bulk of the $300 million fortune, which remains the permanent endowment for the foundation. But they have found something far more valuable: a clean conscience, meaningful work, and a renewed relationship with their mother. I had taught them that the greatest wealth is not what you hoard, but what you build for others. The dusty wooden box now sits on my desk. It is no longer a symbol of betrayal, but a reminder that even the deepest darkness can hide a source of unimaginable light. My life did not end when Robert died. It began anew when I finally chose to stop being invisible and claimed the power that was rightfully mine. This story is a reminder that being underestimated is often a person's greatest strength. Martha was powerful because her children saw her as weak. To all of you listening, what power are you currently hiding from the world? What perceived weakness is actually your secret $300 million fortune? Don't wait for a tragedy to claim your worth.